Thank you. Further statements? The member from Nepean Carleton.
Thank you very much, Speaker. It is my pleasure and distinct honour to represent the Ontario Progressive Conservative Caucus in discussing today the Provincial and National Day of Mourning. I congratulate the Deputy Premier and the Government House Leader for their words. Today we're gathered, and we will be gathered again this afternoon, to remember workers who didn't make it home from their jobs. In this country, when someone leaves for work, we expect that they will come home, but tragically in many cases they do not. I'm going to give you an example. On May 9th, 1992, when I was a grade 11 student, in a small town called New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, at 5:36 a.m. in the morning, our community awoke to one of the biggest mine disasters in the world's history, the Westray mine disaster. It was a brand new mine, and in the early morning of that Sunday, that explosion of methane gas changed that community forever. I remember, Speaker, the other students in my class, my younger sister, in fact even my father, who was a town councillor at the time, worried. In a small town like that, everyone knows somebody who worked at that mine or was likely related to them. The opening of the mine, in fact, brought people from around the world to work in a small town in Pictou County, Nova Scotia, because they were jobs. Unfortunately, that work site was not safe, and 26 men, aging from their early 20s into their 50s, died that day. We would go to school for the following week as they talked openly in the public about identifying people's dental records. We would be in classes. I was in law class. I was taking a grade 12 law class in grade 11, and our teacher took the time to walk us through what this meant for our community. I remember politicians coming in from across Canada into the New Glasgow Stadium to fill that place as if it were the biggest funeral I had ever attended. I'm sure every single person in the community was there. I raised the Westray mine disaster in New Glasgow, Nova Scotia here today for a reason, because it was that national tragedy in that small town impacting 26 families, and by extension an entire country, that changed legislation nationally for better worker protection. It was Bill C-45. Years later, I would go on to work at Parliament Hill as a young staffer, very junior, and I remember with pride the Westray miners that would come up and lobby the government for change, for greater protection. The Westray mine example speaks to what is so bad that was actually changed, because there were, before that, no criminal protections for any worker prior to that. The people of New Glasgow, Nova Scotia, in fact, I think all of Canada, will go on to see the changes that would need to be made to make workplaces safe. I commend all members of this Assembly for greater workplace safety. I would also like to commend the Canadian Labour Congress for their vision on this back in 1984. So as we today speak and remember the people who didn't come home from work, or as the Government House Leader said, who may have post-traumatic stress disorder, I think it's important that we continue to understand that lives aren't simply changed by legislation. Enforcement may also protect them. My experience when I was growing up and is something that I hope no other community ever has to experience. And it's important that I think we learn from those lessons to make sure that people do come home from work. Later this afternoon, our colleague, the member from Hastings, Frontenac, Lennox and Addington, will speak on behalf of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Caucus. He is right now with the Premier and the Minister. And he will add his views onto why it's important to remember each year on April 28th in the National Day of Mourning. But before I end, I think it's also important that we share a focus on rehabilitating and reintroducing workers back into the workforce. Our goal should always be to have people using their talents to provide for themselves and their families and to live a long, happy and prosperous and healthy life. Thank you, Speaker.